But what I'm really concerned about right now is we're getting ready to do the National Defense Authorization Act. This is something that we will pass. We've passed it now for 55 consecutive years, and it's going to be passed this time. But it's important because one of the primary constitutional responsibilities we have is to provide for the common defense of our great nation. And recent worldwide events highlight the urgency for this need. I've spoken numerous times about the grave threat posed by North Korea and warned that it would not be long before North Korea could demonstrate the capability to fire intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States. Now it's not just me saying it, others are saying it. We've had a lot of very courageous individuals coming forth and from the military. I'm not used to this. I've been here for 23 years, and yet I've not seen them come forth and just be clear about the threat that is facing this country. In April, Admiral Harry Harris, he's the Pacific Command Commander, testified in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee that it's clearly not a matter of when, it is a matter of when and not if, that Korea will develop the capability to strike the United States of America. Now, this has never happened before. In April and in May, Lieutenant General Vince Stewart, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, testified. He testified actually before my subcommittee that I chair. He said, let me be clear about this point. If on its current trajectory, the regime will ultimately succeed in fielding a nuclear-armed missile capable of threatening the United States homeland. You know, we've talked about this being the greatest threat, the most threatened position we've been in in the history of this country. And it's no longer. I've often referred to the good old days of the Cold War. We had two superpowers. We knew what they had. They knew what we had. And it was predictable. It's not predictable anymore. You have countries like Yemen, countries like Iran, countries like North Korea that are developing these capabilities that they now have. It's within reach. Since then, I've unfortunately been proven to be correct that North Korea regime continues to demonstrate its dire threat facing us. On July 4th, North Korea successfully launched their first ICBM, the first time they did it. It fired on a standard trajectory. That missile could have ranged Alaska. Some experts say it could have gone even deeper into the continental United States. Now, in light of that test, the Defense Intelligence Agency updated their assessment of the timeline by which North Korea will be able to reliably range United States cities, we're talking about like Washington, D.C., with nuclear missiles as early as the end of next year and even earlier. And now, this past Sunday, September 3rd, North Korea tested what is believed to be a hydrogen bomb. It's most powerful nuclear weapon to date, almost 7 times as powerful as the bomb detonated over Hiroshima. North Korea media immediately stated the nuclear test was to determine the accuracy and credibility of its hydrogen bomb to be placed at the payload of an ICBM. It doesn't get any more direct than that. Even if delivered by a relatively ICBM, because they are relatively inaccurate, a nuclear device as powerful as the one tested Sunday could devastate its tower. Just think about that. 7 to 10 times stronger than the one that wiped out Hiroshima. It's important to remember that all this power is being wielded by an erratic despot, Kim Jong-un. North Korea's official newspaper relayed the threat of a preemptive strike in April that would, and now this is in their newspaper, and this is a quote from their newspaper, it would completely and immediately wipe out not only the United States imperialist invasion forces in South Korea and its surrounding areas, but the United States mainland and reduce them to ashes. Now, there's a newspaper that is behind this president and over there and has made this threat to the United States. So we've never experienced anything like this in this country before. So now we're getting into the NDAA. This year we have to keep this grave threat foremost in our minds, and we are doing it. I've had numerous conversations with the chairman of our committee, and we are going to make these commitments. We have serious readiness deficits that are going to have to be addressed right away. Over the last 90 days, a spike in accidents. I just had the CNO of the Navy and the Secretary of the Navy in my office just a few minutes ago talking about how they're addressing this thing. It is hard to correlate these accidents with a readiness decline as a result of numerous continuous resolution and sequestrations. Just another surprise that we have that we've not had before. Our forces are now smaller than the days of the Hollow Force. Some of us remember that was back after the Carter administration. It was one where they declared, our own forces declared that it was a Hollow Force of the 70s. Well, we had a hearing just the other day, and we had some of the top people in from the administration. In fact, it was the vice chiefs of all of the services, and they agreed that our situation right now is worse than it was in the days of the Hollow Force. So our Air Force is short 1,500 pilots. 1,300 of those are fighter pilots. Only 50% of our Air Force squadrons are trained and ready to conduct all of their assigned missions. The Navy is the smallest and least ready it's been in years, and currently can only meet about 40% of the demand from regional combatant commanders. More than half of the Navy's aircraft are grounded because they're awaiting maintenance or lack of necessary spare parts. And the Marine Corps is struggling to keep their aging F-18 Hornets airworthy. And I think the last I heard, they were down to only, they had 62% of them that were not ready to address readiness. The Army has said only about a third of their brigade combat teams, 1/4 of their combat aviation brigades, and 1/2 of their division headquarters are currently ready. That's a sobering assessment, and we are, again, in the most threatened position we've been in as a nation. Well, the bill we presented out of the Armed Services Committee goes a long ways toward closing these readiness gaps. Our bill increases end strength and boosts funding for equipment, operation, maintenance, military construction, and includes a 2.1% pay increase for our troops. It also addresses many requirements for the service's commanders' unfunded priority list. I'm also pleased that the Senate Armed Services Committee, NDAA, prohibits a base realignment and closure round this year. It's called a BRAC round. A BRAC round is where they go through and make an evaluation as to what our capabilities are and what changes should be made, what bases should be closed, and decisions like that. The problem with that is, if you do this when we've gone through a period of disarmament, some have called it, we are in a position right now where we need every nickel we can have for military. And one thing that is always a certainty, when you go through a BRAC round, it always costs money the first few years, and we can't afford to do it right now. And so our NDAA also fully funds the Missile Defense Agency unfunded priorities, which is important considering that since 2006, the Missile Defense Agency budget has fallen more than 23%. Every amendment we consider in our NDAA this year should be equally focused on increasing readiness across the services. Now, wrap up with a quote from General Mark Milley, the Chief of Staff of the Army. This quote is one that we should keep in mind throughout the NDAA process. General Milley said, and by the way, I admire our uniforms for coming forth and talking about the dilemma that we're in. It's very difficult for them to do that. He said it best when it comes to funding our military, and this is his quote. He said, the only thing more expensive than deterrence is actually fighting a war. And the only thing more expensive than fighting a war is fighting one and losing one. We're expensive, we recognize that, but the bottom line is it's an investment that's worth every nickel, and it is. Apologize to my friend, and will now yield the floor, and suggest that we have, this is probably the most significant bill coming up this year. We're going to be starting, I think Senator McCain said we're going to be starting on it next week, and it's been the most important bill of the year for the last 55 years. It will continue to be this year, and I'll yield the floor.